What would you say if your boss asked you point blank if you were still mad at them? Most people freeze. Most people lie. I did neither, and it completely changed the game. Look, we've all been there. Your boss does something that gets under your skin. Maybe they took credit for your idea. Maybe they threw you under the bus in a meeting. Maybe they promised you something and never delivered. And then what happens? You smile, you nod, you say everything's fine while inside you're boiling. But here's the thing nobody tells you about workplace tension. How you handle that one. Uncomfortable moment when your boss actually asks if you're upset can either trap you in the same position forever or catapult you into a completely different relationship with them. This is the story of how one conversation with my CEO turned a toxic work situation into the best career move I ever made. And I'm going to break down exactly what happened so you can use it too. So let me set the scene. I'd been working at this tech startup for about 2 years. Good company, decent pay, but my CEO, Jeannie, had this habit that drove me absolutely insane. She'd ask for my input on major decisions. I'd spend hours putting together analysis and recommendations, and then she'd completely ignore everything I said and do the opposite. Not sometimes. Every single time. The worst part? She'd still ask me to execute her decision like I was just some robot with no brain. The breaking point came during a product launch. I'd warned her for 3 weeks that our timeline was unrealistic. I showed her data. I brought in examples from our competitors who crashed and burned doing the exact same thing. I even got the entire development team to back me up. She smiled, said she appreciated my thoroughness, and then told the board we'd launch in half the time I recommended. Surprise, surprise, the launch was a disaster. Bugs everywhere. Customers furious. The support team working 16-hour days to put out fires. And who got blamed in the executive meeting? Not Jeannie. She stood up there and said the team hadn't communicated the challenges clearly enough. I was sitting right there. I felt my face get hot. My hands were shaking under the table. But I didn't say anything. I just sat there like a coward and took it. For the next 2 weeks, I was a mess. I'd show up to work, do the bare minimum, and leave. No more extra effort. No more detailed analyses. If Jeannie asked my opinion, I'd give her 3 words and a shrug. My teammates noticed. One of them, Alex, pulled me aside and asked what was wrong. I told him everything. He just laughed and said, "Welcome to corporate life. You either deal with it or quit." Neither option sounded good to me. Then one Tuesday morning, Jeannie messaged me. "Coffee at 10? No context, no agenda. Just those 3 words. I knew something was up because she never did casual coffee chats. I walked into her office at 10 on the dot. She had 2 cups already poured. She gestured to the chair across from her desk and I sat down. We made small talk for maybe 30 seconds. And then she just stopped mid-sentence and looked at me. "Alex told me you've been struggling lately," she said. I made a mental note to murder Alex later. I wanted to check in with you. Are you still upset with me about the launch? There it was. The question. The moment where most people would say no, I'm fine, everything's great, and then go back to quietly resenting their boss for the next 5 years. I could feel my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to just lie and get out of there. But another part of me, the part that was so tired of swallowing my frustration, decided to do something different. I took a breath and said, "Yeah, I am." The room went quiet. Jeannie didn't look angry. She didn't look defensive. She just nodded and said, "Tell me why." So I did. But here's the key thing. I didn't attack her. I didn't say you're a terrible boss or you never listen to me. I used something I'd read about once called the FBI hostage negotiation technique. I focused on facts and feelings, not accusations. I said, when I spend weeks preparing analysis and it gets ignored, I feel like my expertise doesn't matter here. And when the launch failed after I'd warned about the exact problems that happened, and then the communication breakdown got blamed on the team, I felt like I was being set up to fail. I watched her face while I talked. She wasn't defensive. She was actually listening. When I finished, she was quiet for what felt like forever. Then she said something I never expected. "You're absolutely right. I did ignore your analysis, and I threw the team under the bus to protect myself with the board. That was wrong." I almost fell out of my chair. In 2 years of working there, I'd never heard her admit she was wrong about anything. She kept going. "I need to tell you why I did it, and I need you to understand this isn't an excuse, it's context. The board had been pushing me to prove we could move fast. 3 of our competitors launched similar features before us, and our investors were getting nervous. I felt like if I didn't show aggressive timelines, they'd replace me. So I gambled. I bet that even if your timeline was realistic, maybe we could push harder and prove everyone wrong. I was trying to save my own job, and I made you collateral damage. That's not leadership. That's self-preservation. Here's what blew my mind about this moment. She wasn't trying to make me feel sorry for her. She wasn't trying to justify what she did. She was giving me the real reason, the human reason, behind a decision that looked completely insane from my perspective. And suddenly the whole situation looked different. I wasn't working for some robot who didn't value me. I was working for someone who was scared and made bad decisions because of that fear. But I wasn't ready to just forgive and forget. So I asked her, okay, but what changes? Because if this just happens again in 3 months, we're having the same conversation. She smiled. Not a fake corporate smile. A real one. That's exactly the right question. Here's what I'm proposing. From now on, when I ask for your analysis, I'm going to tell you up front what constraints I'm dealing with. Board pressure, investor timelines, whatever it is, you'll have the full picture. And if I decide to go against your recommendation, I'm going to tell you exactly why before the decision gets made, not after. You might still disagree with my choice, but at least you'll understand the reasoning. And if something goes wrong, I take the hit. Not you, not the team, me. Does that work? I sat there thinking about it. Was this just corporate talk? Was she going to actually follow through? I decided to test it. What about the launch disaster? Are you going to clarify with the board what actually happened? She didn't hesitate. I'm sending an email today taking full line responsibility and explaining that the team had flagged the risks appropriately. Your name specifically is going in there as someone who provided accurate analysis that I chose not to follow. I left that meeting feeling completely different. Not because everything was magically fixed, but because for the first time, I felt like I was dealing with a real person instead of a corporate wall. And here's the crazy part. She actually did everything she promised. The email went out that afternoon. Over the next 6 months, she completely changed how she communicated with me. Before every major decision, she'd walk me through the political landscape, the board dynamics, the investor pressure, all of it. Sometimes I'd still disagree with her choices, but I understood why she was making them. And something else shifted too. Because I'd been honest with her, she started being more honest with me about everything. I became like her sounding board for the messy reality of running a company. Within a year, she promoted me to VP and told the board it was because I was one of, the only people who'd tell her the truth even when it was uncomfortable. So here's what I learned from all this. When your boss asks if you're upset, most people think they have 2 options. Lie and say no or blow up and burn bridges. But there's a third option nobody talks about. Tell the truth, but do it smart. Don't attack. Don't make it personal. Focus on specific situations, how they made you feel, and what needs to change going forward. Use facts, not emotions. And here's the secret. Most bosses actually respect honesty way more than they respect fake harmony. Now, I'm not saying every boss is like Jeannie. Some bosses are just terrible people who'll punish you for speaking up. But here's how you figure out which type you're dealing with. Watch how they respond to the first 30 seconds. If they get defensive immediately, if they start making excuses, if they try to flip it back on you, that's your sign to keep it surface level and start looking for a new job. But if they actually listen, if they ask questions, if they seem genuinely interested in understanding your perspective, that's a boss worth being honest with. The other thing I learned is that timing matters. Don't have this conversation when you're furious. Don't do it right after the thing that upset you. Give yourself time to cool down and think through what you actually want to say. I got lucky that Jeannie waited 2 weeks before asking me. If she'd asked me the day after that meeting, I probably would have said something I regretted. And one more thing, have a specific ask. Don't just vent about what's wrong. Come prepared with what needs to be different. When Jeannie asked me what changes, I could have just said I don't know, figure it out. But that puts all the burden on her and makes it less likely anything actually shifts. Instead, I was ready with concrete things that would make the situation better. Looking back, that 10-minute coffee chat was the turning point of my entire career. Not because it was comfortable. It wasn't. Not because it was easy. It definitely wasn't, but because I stopped pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. And I did it in a way that opened up a real conversation instead of shutting one down. 3 years later, I'm still at the same company. Jeannie and I have the best working relationship I've ever had with a boss. And I've used the same approach with conflicts on my own team now that I manage people. So the next time your boss asks if you're upset, don't just say no. Don't just explode. Take a breath, tell the truth, and see what happens. You might be surprised at what changes when you stop playing the game everyone expects you to play. If this helped you, the next video is going to show you exactly what to say in your next one-on-one with your boss to get the raise you deserve. So make sure you catch that.